Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Nicole, thank you for being a Draftworx user so many years ago. The first time I met Nicole properly was she actually attended one of the Excel courses that I used to run when I was a lot younger. And yeah, she was a star student, and I didn't actually know at the time that she was learning a lot of her using a lot of her Excel skills to actually update Draftworks functions and things like that. She was just going one ahead. And yeah, it's been wonderful to have you actually join the team, Nicole. And
Thank you,
thank you
Shane.
for doing so. I just want to say thank you to Clarissa and Mariandra as well. Thank you to you guys for taking care of the Q&A. And then Nicole, I'm only introducing you. You're going to introduce other speakers as they come in. And so, yeah, I think that over to you. Thanks very
Sure.
much.
Thanks, Shane. Thank you so much for everything you do on our side as well. Always appreciated. Firstly, welcome everyone. Welcome to any new participants. Welcome back to any of our participants that have been following the series so far. Hopefully, this one is going to give you guys some more new insights and tips and tricks like our previous webinars. It's been really great to have the support this year, and the feedback has been super awesome to hear. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, thank you to all our users, because without you, the stream would not be possible. We wouldn't be here without you. Okay, today we wanted to attempt something, a very secret covert mission, and we wanted to actually kidnap or sneak out some of our template team members from an undisclosed location where they are currently on a very important secret mission. However, I failed miserably at a kidnapping attempt. So with that, I would actually like to take a massive shout out to all our template team members whom without, we would not be able to have our frameworks or our working papers, and therefore I wouldn't be able actually to talk about anything, to be looking at a blank screen. So thank you to the team. Thank you for your hard ongoing work throughout the year. Today's session, we're basically going to be navigating our way through our value-added components, and these are our ever-amazing working papers, or previously referred to as methodologies, right? So without much ado, I am now going to share my screen and turn my camera off. I hope you enjoy. Okay, so navigating Draftworx Working Papers, or as previously known, the methodologies, okay? So on my slide, what you'll see are, what are working papers? Well, simply put, the working papers are the additional components you can add to your file, some extra value. The new layout includes the words working papers. The original layout from when Draftworx was first around and when I was first using those Excel formulas Shane mentioned, it used to refer to as methodology. However, we have aligned it to say working papers. So any of our original guys, hey, I was there in the beginning with you too. We've gone from methodology to working papers, okay? Now, what is actually available? So what can I use? What value added information can I kind of incorporate in my files? So simply put, I've got a list here of working papers, the applicable standard it applies, whether it has a rack layout, and whether it's available in all countries or where is it available, right? So Accounting Officer Plus, we have based that on the applicable CIPA working papers standards, okay? It has a rack layout. Now, what is rack layout? All right, so rack, you're going to hear a bit about it today. You're going to hear a lot about it next week on Tuesday the 4th if you join our lovely rack seminar that we are hosting. It's basically risk assessment per component, okay? Now, this just kind of has a nice little flow. Everything's in its sections. We'll cover that in a bit. But it has that applicable to it, and it's available in South Africa and Namibia. Then, of course, we have agreed upon procedures. What are agreed upon procedures? Well, maybe I have a client and they want me to perform a specific engagement. I don't know, my clients approach me, they're worried that their revenue is being taken from them because they're a cash-only industry. I need to perform specific procedures to address that concern. And that, of course, is in terms of ISRS 4400. Okay. Has it got the rack layout? Well, yes and no. It's a little bit of a mix. It's like a hybrid. Okay. We're going to run through it. We're going to check the differences. And of course, it's available to all our templates and countries. Legal practitioner engagements, previously known as attorney trust audits. Okay. This we have based on the URBA guide. This does have a rack layout because, it kind of follows some audit procedures. So we want it to flow. We like the word flow when we're looking at working papers. I'm going to use it a lot today. So if I sound like a broken record, apologies. And of course, it's available in South Africa. Property practitioner, again, based on the URBA guide, also got a rack layout, also available only in South Africa. Compilation Plus, based on ISRS 4410. And again, it's got a little bit of both, so another little hybrid of ours, and available to all. Okay, now we get to our rack, right? Risk assessment per component. These are based on your ISAs and most frequently the ISA 315. Okay, it is definitely got a rack layout, otherwise we wouldn't have a rack layout. And then of course available to all. Then we have Review Plus. Now Review Plus is an independent review, so we base it on ISRE 2400. Yes, it's got the rack layout and it's available to all. Now we're going to highlight something. So for guys who are like me, who've been around with Draftworx from the beginning, we used to obviously have accounting officer, compilation, audit light working papers, okay? These were then referred to as legacies, okay, because they were the originals. However, what happened is we didn't really have an applicable standard to base them on. Yes, audit light we could base on ISA, but then of course ISA 315 came into play, so we wanted to ensure working papers are compliant. Now, we have had to make the decision and we've discontinued these working papers. Now, it's raised quite a few questions and concerns, and I'm going to try and address that as comfortably as possible today. Okay. So Audit Light Plus and Legacy, the end of the road. Okay. Audit Light Plus was for all financial years commencing before 15 December 2021 when ISA 315 came into play. Legacy Accounting Officer, Legacy Compilation, they have all been discontinued effective November 2024. All right. So what does this mean to our existing users that have been using any one of those applicable working papers? Simply put, if you were using Audit Light, okay, for any financial years commencing on or after 15 December 2021, you will see it's asking you to please switch the methodology to RAC to ensure you are compliant with ISA 315. Alrighty. And then my legacy working papers and frameworks. Alrighty. So frameworks, if you remember in the basics and the advanced, these are our financial statements, whether it's a closed corporation, IFRS SME, or IFRS, okay? Any of those legacy financial statements that are still being used will be rolled forward, okay? If you do not wish to switch the plus templates over, you can still continue with your roll forward. The only thing that's going to not be rolled forward is the discontinued working papers. So you're not going to lose your financial statements. It's just that we need to apply that switch to the new template. Working papers, what are they? They're the templates enabling you to go through a particular engagement based on that outcome you need to report on to provide your client with the relevant assurance. Any legacy or audit lights will not roll forward at this point. So that's when you can switch them to Accounting Officer Plus, or Compilation Plus, or RAC, depending on the engagement you're working on. So what are some of the issues that would pop up? So as you can see over here, I have got my switching from legacy to plus. How's it going to work? So some of these errors are some of the ones that you would have seen if you have used them. If you haven't, this may be what you'll see in the future. So I've got roll forward error, and it's basically telling me that the working papers in use is no longer supported. Okay, so I either need to, when I'm rolling forward, go and say, all right, my working papers was legacy compilation. I can still leave my framework as legacy IFRS SME, but now I can go and I can say, okay, legacy compilation, I will switch to Compilation Plus. Or down below, you can see I've got a legacy closed corporation. It was an Accounting Officer legacy set. I'm going to change it to Accounting Officer Plus. Same would be if I had Audit Light. I just need to switch it to RAC at this point. All right. So again, remember, your work, your existing work, not affected. Your framework is not affected. We just need to update to the most recent working papers to ensure compliance with the relevant standards. Okay. Again, you can also switch from your legacy to plus working papers within your client setup. You just go to switch frameworks, you select the working papers, and again, just choose the relevant engagement that you are looking at. All right, now we're going to look at navigating the working papers, right? So I'm going to go through quite a few of them. So this is generally what one may see. So if I click on my working papers, I would see all these different folders. What is the relevance of them? We're going to kind of briefly touch up on them in all our different working papers available. Right, now navigating. So yeah, you can see I've listed all our working papers available, and I've kind of said, right, which area is applicable to which working paper. So I have finalization, we've got engagement setup, we have planning, system notes, risk assessment, audit plans, other plans, special cycles, and then of course, cycles in itself. So obviously, most of our working papers have finalization, engagement setups, and planning. What you'll note though, anything to do with risk assessment is applicable to RAC mostly. So system notes is included in RAC, risk assessment included in RAC and review, and then of course our audit plan in RAC. All right. So these are all based on the different engagement you'll choose. And again, I am going to highlight these once I go through these slides. It's going to be really exciting. Okay. Our working papers tab, if you haven't seen it before, well, here we go. It's just generally where one would be able to find your working papers. So I can populate working programs, I can populate estimates, I can even populate additional templates. For example, I'm looking for reliance on an expert or reliance on another auditor, and I want that template working paper. That's great. I can go to these additional templates and I can add it to my system. I simply just go and create it. So there you'll see I have 1905, reliance on an expert. It is asking me for a document name. So there I would input the name, save it to my working papers, input the file. There's my template, and I can continue with those procedures and evaluation on that additional template I'm looking at. All right, today's session in all our working papers, I'm going to focus on some key decision documents. So what are key decision documents? At this point, during any engagement, you need to make a key decision. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What is the purpose of what I'm doing? And how is Draftworx going to help me get to that conclusion? Okay, so here you'll see these are your key decision documents, which we're going to run through currently. So we're going to start with our dear friend RAC. But before I start with RAC, I do just want to make a notice. We are having a phenomenal webinar next week on the 4th that is going to go through RAC in detail. I'm highlighting the key decisions. I may refer to the RAC webinar a few times. Again, apologies if I'm a broken record, but it will be a great one to attend. So if you are an auditor and you are curious about it, by all means, please join it. It is going to be riveting. Okay. Now, when I'm looking at my RAC file, so my risk assessment per component, okay? Remember, auditing focuses on risk in this sense, okay? Apologies. Now I need to go and I say, okay, when I'm looking at a RAC audit, I have a workflow. So I said I'm going to use the word flow a lot. Why do I want to use the word flow a lot? Well, as in our financial statements, we automate, okay? So same kind of principle applies to our working papers. Where we fill in information in one document, it will flow to another document. So it's always nice to go with the flow. All right. So in RAC workflow, I've got my pre-engagement activities, which is always your section 10. This is where you're kind of setting up your engagement and your teams and you identifying a few things here or there, you know, and then it moves into planning. So basically some of your factors you've identified in engagement activities will pull through to your planning. Then of course you do your planning. From planning, what happens? I've got to assess my risk because that is important. That's where my audit, you know, decisions are really important. And then of course, from planning, we hit our lovely stage, if you're an auditor, of doing the execution. You've got to run through all those procedures, provide that assurance that is going to hit your reporting or your finalization. So as you can see, we do have a workflow, okay? One is nice to just follow through, see which working papers relate to others. And again, this will be detailed quite heavily in our next webinar. All right, so now let's focus on those key decision documents. First one I have here, and I'm going to open my working papers, right? Because they're all different in all our working paper components. So you'll see finalization, engagement, and team setup, quite a lot of documents there. Our rack has a lot of planning documents for consideration, and we have system notes, lovely system cycles. So again, lots of documentation, but all key in certain places. Then of course, we've got our risk assessment per component, i.e. why are we doing what we're doing? Then I've got my audit plan. Then I've got other planning documents here and there, and of course, any special risk items. So my folder kind of stops at 20 to 29, okay? When I have considered all my key documents and I've done everything in accordance to my flow, I'm able to populate working programs, okay? The working programs I populate, they will have all my procedures and stuff that I'm going to do to satisfy my conclusion that the financials are free from material misstatement, right? So generally, your rack will always look like this when you initially start. Okay. Now I go and I look at my first key consideration document. Engagement, acceptance, and continuance. Well, why would this be a key document? Well, simply put, are you going to accept your engagement that you're doing? Is there anything identified to decline the engagement? I don't know. I need to assess that. So in our working papers, you'll see I've got light blue cells, I've got yellow cells. So again, a yellow cell kind of says to me, I need some information from you. So now I'm going to say, okay, well, what's the question? Is this a new or is this a continuing engagement? Drop down menu, I get to choose. And depending on my options that I choose, it will populate another working paper for me to complete, or it'll mark it as not applicable. So if I say it's a new engagement, I wouldn't do any working papers relative to a continuing engagement, therefore taking away unnecessary working papers to do. So again, we like to prompt you, go with the flow, populate what you need to work on. Okay, so I'm just going to say it's a continuing engagement. So again, reading through the questions, you'll see all the different ISAs that are addressed, and I kind of need to go through my engagement, acceptance, and continuance. Again, I see yellow lines, so this is prompting me to fill in some information. This information here pulls through from a hyperlink. So I would go to 1002, I would address my conflicts of independence, conflicts of interest, or check that my independence issues are good, and then I would conclude on it. And all those conclusions will pull through here. Again, this was all covered in detail in the RAC webinar. Okay, so I go through my questions, check, check, check. Now I see more, and ideally over here, you'll see it's referencing you to other working papers throughout it. So one for consideration is, must an EQR be performed? So there's a hyperlink to it. I need to go consider it. So I go, I answer the questions, drop down, is this client a listed entity? No. I can then go and add my information. And I've got another yellow cell which prompts me for a conclusion. I'm going to say EQR is not required. And when I do, it updates my information for me. So again, lots of automation happening through, and it's a nice flow because whatever you do here does affect other working papers throughout. So what's the public interest score? Well, let's go and have a look. 1002. So does the entity fall under the Companies Act? Yes. What's my entity? So again, I just need to kind of fill this in. On that note, on Thursday during our XBRL session, we will be highlighting a public interest scores component. So please also feel free to join on Thursday for the XBRL. It is bound to be a really good session as well. So here, I just need to basically fill in information as I need to, answer all my questions, and as I do, I start filling in my information. Incomplete cells does require attention, so of course you'd want to consider those completed as you need to. The most important part of this document is these last two lines over here. Engagement acceptance, or engagement partner conclusion and acceptance. So me as a partner, I need to decide, am I going to accept this client or am I going to decline it based on just this little bit of pre-engagement activities I've done? Decide I'm going to continue with the audit and I'm accepting it. Okay. I can then go and mark it as prepared if I was maybe the clerk. I can then go and log in. So let me just quickly log in as partner. So I'll need it a bit later. And I can mark it as reviewed. All right. So I'd follow that process. Here we go. Now, planning materiality. Okay, it's another document for key consideration. Why do I say key consideration? Well, materiality links to another certain more important document. Are you going to audit every line item in your financial statements? Are you identifying material items, non-material items? What is the scope of your audit going to be? And materiality kind of has that effect. So of course you would fill in your materiality working paper, you'd do all your decisions, you'd figure out what your materiality is going to be. And when you do, we go to 1020, because 1020 is critical, because this is now where I'm going to identify what am I auditing. Am I going to just go gung-ho and audit every single thing, even though, it isn't relevant? Do I really want to over-audit work, or do I want to, identify what is critical to audit? So as a note here, I'm just going to highlight one line per se. Investment income, okay? It's 107,000 there. It's got quantitatively material over here, and it says no. So based on my materiality, which we've got as 997,500, it's not material. So if I haven't filled in my planning materiality and I left it at 1, okay, because we need a bare minimum of at least 1, you would now note it's going to pick up that investment income is material. So it's now very much so applicable to my audit, okay? So I now need to ensure that my materiality is at least selected so that I can decide exactly which sections are important that I'm going to identify in my audit, okay? So we go back, we fill in our materiality. As you can see, my materiality has pulled through, okay? Now I've got a few points to consider. So my figures are coming through from my trial balance. I've got quantitatively material, so i.e., is the amount quantitatively material, i.e., is it above or below my materiality figure that I've decided on? Okay, so this is automatically selected. Now I've got another line here, qualitatively material. Okay, so again, I need to assess, is the line item qualitatively material? So for example, the investment income again, okay, it's not quantitatively material. So now I need to decide, is it qualitatively material? Yes or no. So I do need to make that assessment. Okay, so I can say yes, or I could say, you know what, it's not qualitatively material. However, it is still applicable to my audit as I need to, again, assess that, make sure it's correct. It will then populate to my working programs. Okay, if for argument's sake, I just want to highlight one particular one, you are aware of something that you know is going to be in your audit. However, the client hasn't given you the final journal. So really poor example, but depreciation biological assets. They, at the end of the year, had purchased biological assets, and now, they need to go in and put the depreciation, but they haven't quite finished. So you know for a fact that this is going to be applicable to your audit. You're then able to go and say, okay, if you had an idea of what the amount is, you could choose the drop down, go and indicate yes. Okay. Ultimately, you can go and add it to your audit program, but do this in caution. Don't go and say yes to everything. Otherwise, it's going to pull through to your working papers, resulting in possible over auditing. So ideally, what you're wanting to do here is run through the section carefully, consider and assess so that you're making sure you're not unnecessarily auditing or pulling in documents that you're going to go and mark not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. You want to highlight the sections that are applicable to your audit. Okay. And of course, there's a whole lot of considerations to go through. Again, really detailed in RAC on Tuesday. Now we get to a document that when I was in practice, I used to really enjoy. And by really enjoy, I'm being slightly sarcastic here because we used to do it manually. And understanding the nature of the entity is quite an exhaustive document because you've got to gather a lot of information. So when, of course, Draftworx came along and they brought out the RAC working papers, it was actually a lot easier because it made our lives just a little bit easier in a certain sense. So why do I say easier in a certain sense? Okay, yes, I'm just going to scroll this down. It is still an exhaustively long document, but we need to understand the nature of the business in order for us to assess if there are any potential risks, okay? So yes, it feels like it's a long document, but this brings me to our blue cells. So it's a very dark blue cell that you see here. So throughout RAC, if you see dark blue cells, it's a really awesome cell in the sense of this. If I type in information, that information that I type there on roll forward will roll forward to the next year. So when you have repetitive information in a client in an audit, this will then retain itself and carry forward to the next year. You won't have to repeatedly go type out your owners, your principal shareholders. Okay. However, we have got what we call scoping. So there are, of course, some tan blocks here that is, just addressing something that, caution, please make sure if you are doing this, this is the result and all of that. But what I really enjoy about scoping in RAC is this. Now, lots of sections to consider when you're understanding the nature of the entity. But for example, I know my client very well. I know they are not part of a group, okay? So if I click on the link, it'll take me to my group structure, right? Go to scoping. I know they're not part of a group. I'm going to indicate no. And then it's going to highlight a red cell down below. So it's kind of matched and it says, okay, you said it's not part of a group, but over here you've indicated you've made an investment in a subsidiary. You need to consider that. So again, I'm going to say no, but we're going to jump across to my link now. And as you can see, I don't need to go and write not applicable to the group structure. I have hidden it, okay? Again, this needs quite a lot of skepticism and understanding of your client to ensure you don't go and accidentally say no to something that is applicable. Because at the end of the day, when you're in your understanding the entity, you're trying to identify if there is any potential risk of material misstatement at this point. So for fun, I'm going to identify a risk because I want to show something a bit later. So we're just going to say yes. And you know what? It's just a business risk that I've identified, not a fraud risk. Okay. So there I go and I fill that in. That's my 12.10. Okay. Again, you can scope it out, but use it with caution. Okay. Sound like a learner's license guy. Use it with caution. Okay. Once you've done all of this, okay, you've identified your sections, you've done your, engagement acceptance, you've understood your nature of the business, we kind of have what we call a risk register. Okay. Now, the risk register is going to basically identify any of those risks I've picked up in my financial statements, okay, i.e., or during my planning stages. So this could come from system descriptions, this could come from any of my planning documentation. If I've identified a risk anywhere, it is going to pull to this risk register, risk list, okay? Try saying that 10 times fast. Okay, now you'll see here I've got management override of controls. It was identified as a fraud risk. It's referenced to which working paper. And then, of course, it's now said to me, it's assessed as a fraud risk, okay? Revenue recognition. Now, in 12.10, I went and I identified a risk, okay? So here you can see entities or business segments likely to be sold. I've set it to business risk. If it happened to be a duplicate of another risk, I could indicate that. Is it a compulsory significant risk? You know what? I'm not going to say it is, okay? So I'm assessing it. Might not be the best assessment because at this moment, this client is very not all there, okay? But you want to have your client all there. So again, assessment is key in answering these questions, right? So that's great. You go and you pull out a risk list, but now what? So on each working paper, ideally you will see where there are more than one considerations, we have different tabs, okay? So just because I see 150501, I can't go mark this as prepared because I actually haven't finished this working paper. So I see, ooh, there's another tab. Let's go have a look at 150502. Okay, now remember, I've got 3 risks here. So I'm going to go to my risk current, okay? So those 3 risks that have been identified throughout the working paper, I've now got them showing per sections. So yeah, management override control. Is it a fraud risk? Yes. Is it going to be at financial statement or is it going to be at assertion level? And of course, I then need to, again, assess, right? So So journal, it's a 4 because it is significant risk and it affects all those applicable assertions, right? I then go down and I can go and I can identify any controls related to the significant risks. As you can see, it says, yeah, copy the existing control where from system notes or entity level controls or general IT controls, okay? But let's go have a look at the one I added. Right, so I'm going to scroll down because this one's automatic. So for every risk you get, you'll have your risk popping up. So there's my risk number 3, okay, that we found. Is it a fraud risk? No. I'm going to open up my little grouping over there. Now I need to consider, is it at a financial statement level? So if I had said yes, okay, it's going to open up some other questions for consideration, okay? Again, assess, address what needs to be addressed. I'm going to say no because it's at assertion level. I've assessed that this risk is going to affect certain assertions and certain components, okay? Now I need to say, okay, well, which component is it addressing? So I can go and I can say, well, you know what, let's have a look. I've got investment income, for example. What is my likelihood? I need to go and check and assess. So I'm just going to choose some just to kind of fill out a working paper and show how it pulls through. So overall, my investment income is assessed at a level 2 risk, okay? Which component is it affecting? So at this point, I can now go and say, well, you know what? We're only interested in accuracy, for example. So I'm going to say, yes, accuracy is affected. Okay, well, it's not affecting my completeness for whatever reason because I've gotten to this conclusion, okay? But yeah, I'm able to select what is applicable and what's not applicable. Okay, so I go, I identify if there's any prior or deleted risks, and then there's my summary, okay? So I haven't signed anything off here. Everything's currently a 0, but keeping in mind, I actually haven't done any work in the file. So just bear that in mind. Okay. From your risk register, the key point here, it brings me to 1605. Okay. 1605 and 1505 almost have a secret marriage. Okay. In my mind, that is. Okay. So the secret marriage here is this. Whatever was identified in 1505 is going to pull into my 1605. And now I've got the ability to go and mark non-material items either as not applicable, and this would all be based on what my audit plan is and what I want to pull through to my audit plan, okay? This is a very important document to be considered for signing off, only because what I assess in 1605 in terms of risks is going to affect how my working papers are populated. And I'm going to explain it in a moment once I do a little bit of work here. So again, tan blocks always kind of refer us to something that may be of importance. So it's going to address something that I need to go and look at. So in my case, it says, you know, just go check 1504 or 150504 or whatever, anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to have a look. I've got all my components. I'm just going to mini this so you can see there's all your components that would be inside your financial statements, okay? Now I need to actually go and have a look at each and every one of these components and make an assessment. So go and open revenue, and what I'd see here is all my risks from 1505 would pull through. My total assurance required for the audit, okay? So of course I haven't really set an assurance yet, so mine is at 1, okay? All of these would pull through from your planning documents, okay? Now, there I can see it's carried through to my audit plan. Therefore, if I'm testing revenue, I know that for completeness, occurrence, accuracy, cutoff, classification, and presentation, I need to make sure that my level of assurance is 1. Okay, now I'm going to highlight something. I'm going to jump across to 160502. There's another tab there. Oh, and I see red. Red's so fiery, it's kind of giving me a big warning. So, touching back on revenue, we noted that my revenue said 1, okay? My assertion level should be 1. This document is showing me 3s, okay? Now, if I did not get the partner to sign off on 160501, and 160501 is quite extensive, quite long, you need to go all the way to the bottom, you will see important yellow cells, okay? The partner needs to obviously make their declaration here. See, I'm giving my permission to sign off the components that the above risk levels are correct. Okay. But now I'm looking at my 160502 and they're not correct. I've got a 3 versus a 1. Okay. If I don't have the partners sign off 1605 and I go and I populate all my working papers, i.e., your trade and receivable cycles, your taxation cycles, they're all going to require that assertion level of 3, okay, which could possibly result in over auditing. All right, so crucial document in that sense, right? So you get your partner to sign off, and then of course, all my lovely assertion levels would be what I want them to be. Now I'm going to jump to 17.95. Right. So at this point, I've kind of gone through some critical documents that would get you to a point where I can now go and say, all right, I want to populate my working papers. But now I'm using this and I'm proceeding here with caution. Okay. If I go and I say, well, I want to populate my working programs, I've set up my cycles, I know where everything is that I want it to be, that's great. But now I try and populate the working papers and they're not populating. So 1795 is kind of the end point of your risk assessment, okay? This can be signed off by a manager or a partner, okay? And all these documentations, i.e. your 1025 result from document hasn't been signed off, okay? I say no here, okay, because I haven't signed off anything, right? I need to confirm, am I actually happy to proceed and generate my working papers, okay? Again, one wants to proceed with caution because when you generate your working papers and there is something that's either being overly assessed at high risk when it could be a low risk, just results in potential over testing. We want you to obviously test what you need to test. Okay, so I'm having a look and I see a validation tab here. So this validation check is in play for my populating of my audit programs. So are my components all allocated to a cycle? Yes, I went and I did that in 1020. Okay, so it's happy. Is 1795 correctly confirmed? And I can see a no. So, all right, so what do I have to do? So in this case, not highly recommended. I'm just going to go and indicate yes. Okay. In the real pretty world, you would obviously like the one column to all say yeses, and you're agreeing to it. But in some cases, we know how auditing goes, and we're still busy filling up, the system note descriptions, but we are at least satisfied with our risk level. So I'm going to go and I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to be like, okay, would I like to lock my preliminary analytical procedures at this point? Yes. Okay. So I can go and indicate another yes there. And then an important one here. Has the audit evidence obtained from my risk assessment procedures listed above given me the appropriate identification? Like, am I satisfied in populating these audit working programs? Going to go and I'm going to say yes. Okay. Now my validation says it's being correctly confirmed. Okay. Now I need to sign it off. Okay. So again, if I were to, just want to mini that a little bit. If I were to try and populate any working programs at the moment, nothing would happen. Okay. Because I have not correctly signed off 1795. So partner or manager logs in, they sign it off. It's now indicated as yes. Okay. All right. Now our last document to look at from a planning point of view. So I can actually go and populate those working programs while I say this. Okay. Going to populate some working papers for me. Now, the last document to look at that's kind of critical when you're looking at RAC is the planning sign-off document. Okay. Now, planning sign-off document. So what have we noticed now with my working papers? Remember, it took me up to 20 to 29. I now have my other cycles, which have my audit programs. Again, covered extensively in the RAC audit, so I'm not going to touch on that. But planning sign-off. Why is this a critical document? Okay. So at this point, you want to remember that it's important that when you sign off planning, that means you're moving into your execution phase. Okay. But before I even proceed with my very ugly looking 18 sign off, I'm going to take a moment to introduce one of my colleagues, actually welcoming her back because she's been on one of our previous sessions. So let me introduce or reintroduce the ever cheerful Tafadzwa with her tantalizing tips and tricks when it comes to navigating what feels like treacherous waters. Taf, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm the ever cheerful Tafadzwa. I have a few for you guys regarding our RAC working papers. The first one being in 10.03. So what happens when you have more than 3 team members and they all need a certificate of independence and you're like, I've opened up the working paper, there's only 3, how do I add in more? It's quick, it's simple, it's easy. All you have to do is go to your content tab like this. You'll see under show or hide worksheets. The sheets are already there. All you have to do is click on them and open them, and there you go. You can now complete your certificate of independence for all the additional people that are in your audit team, and then you can move on. So once you've completed, I know some people want to assign notes or add notes to specific team members. That will be covered in detail in our RAC webinar next week. So please do join us if you're interested to know how that works. Now that we've gotten 10.03 out of the way, we've completed all our planning correctly, how we're supposed to, and we're happy, and you've now come to your planning sign-off and you open it. And then it looks like this. How do you move on from here? You've completed planning, you've populated your work programs, you've selected all the appropriate procedures. You here, you open it, you see that for some of my audit programs, it says my planning has been completed adequately. Yay! But for some, there's a red block and it's saying that my audit program does not comply with my audit plan. And some, it's just simply blank. What does this mean? And how do you navigate this situation? So let's start with the blank ones and what this means. When your audit program is showing the result as blank, it simply means that you have not ever opened that work program. It has not seen you, you have not seen it. So what we'll do is we'll open it quickly, and I want to show you then what happened in 18 when we've opened it and the audit program has seen us and we've seen it. I'm just going to jump right back to 18.00. You see now we've opened it, it becomes red, now telling us that our audit program does not comply with the audit plan. So what does this mean when we have this? What this means is that our audit program does not have enough procedures to cover the remaining assurance levels. Now that I've opened my audit program, we're going to do the taxation one. I'm going to guide you through how to navigate and solve the issue. I've opened, I've scrolled it, I'm under my analytical procedures. Here, remaining planned substantive analytical assurance required, we have these red blocks and there's ones, which means that for these particular assertions, we do not have enough procedures to address them. How do I solve this? I need to either select a pre-made procedure, or in this case, I'm going to formulate my procedure that actually addresses what I'm trying to address. I want my procedure one to be performed. Yes, I do. What component does it relate to? I'm trying to address my taxation expense, so tax expense here under components. So I know it's to do with these assertions, so I'm going to populate that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, what is my desired level of assurance for this procedure one? In my case, it's 1, and immediately you'll see that all those ones in the red blocks have cleared. We're good to go. Remember, this is substantive analytical procedures. You also want to navigate your list of details. Ensure that you don't have red blocks at the bottom of your list of details. In my case, I have these red blocks and I need to solve that problem. How do I go about this? Here we have procedures that we can select to be performed. Remember, I'm going to do this at random, but when you're actually doing your audit, you need to read the procedures and ensure that they actually comply with what you're trying to do. So I'm just going to go yes, 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 because my partner trusts me so much. So he's just going to say whatever Tafadzwa said, that's perfect. And then I'm going to go back and I realize there's still a little one here. I've selected everything that I want to select to be performed, but there's nothing quite hitting the spot for my occurrence. So I want to create a procedure that addresses that one occurrence assertion. I'm going to say my procedure here. I want it to be performed. Yes, I do. And I know I'm targeting specifically my tax expense. So yes, that's my component. I know my assertion is occurrence, existence, and my desired assurance level for this procedure is 1. And then I'm happy. And then it's cleared. Now let's look what happens when we go back to our planning sign off. Voila, magic. Now it's saying that my taxation audit program planning has been completed adequately. So this is what we want to do. When we open our 18.00, we want to make sure that for all our audit program, it's saying planning has been completed adequately. There shouldn't be any red blocks or any blank blocks. We want to make sure that this is correct. When we're happy with our result, we are A-OK, we then move over to our action 1 and we complete. Have all my planning documents been completed? Yes, I have completed them and I know they're correct and I'm happy. Have all my audit programs been populated? Yes, I populated them. I also selected my procedures and made sure that they comply with the audit plan, and I'll click yes. What this does, it switches your audit programs to execution. Once that's done, the engagement partner, he's now happy, tab selected everything, my results are all good. He's going to come and say yes here and yes, and then sign off the planning sign off. So the key things to take away from this, you want to make sure that everything here says planning completed adequately. If it's blank, it means that the working program has never seen you and you have never seen it. You have not been acquainted at all in this life. And then if it's red, it means you need to select more procedures to cover the remaining assurance level. And that's how you would go about your 18.00 and ensuring that it's A-OK. That's it from me. I'm now going to hand over back to Nicole.
As Taf so lovely explained, okay, obviously, ultimately, you want that planning completed adequately, okay? Because remember, when your planning has been completed adequately, you're addressing the fact that your assertions, your planning, all your procedures you're about to complete comply with your audit plan and your scope and your nature and your timing. Trust me, those audit budgets are no joke. Okay, so I wouldn't want to go as Taf went, gung-ho, select all those procedures because, again, I'm not going to either end up overdoing some work that I didn't really need to. Remember, this is obviously for full disclosure. This is just showing you how these things work. Please don't follow us directly, i.e. go just tick every single procedure. Please do read through them as Taf explained. However, Taf, would you please do me one solid favor and show us 35.20? So when Taf had her screen on, you initially saw the planning stage. Now, when your partner signs off, this indicates execution phase, i.e. it has now summarized my document a little bit more for me. I can see which components have been covered. I can now go and reference to my work, do my comments, and then obviously address, did this procedure get tested satisfactorily? Taf, if you don't mind, just scroll down a little bit more, right to the bottom. Now, if, for example, I had gone and done something, you'll see there, planning is completed adequately. So I know for a fact all my planning's been addressed, but I still see a lot of yellows. So execution's not addressed all my risks. That's because I simply haven't gone and said, yes, my execution gave me a satisfactory result and I've concluded on it. Okay. Taf, sorry, one last one. Just jump to the, was it bank and cash that's still red? Okay. So scroll down a little bit. Okay, now in the cases where I may have made an oopsie and I didn't select enough planning procedures, i.e. I somehow managed to miss a red here or there, I now see that in action 4 under A, it does let me know that planning does not comply with my audit plan. So again, it's just referring that I haven't addressed enough procedures to give me a satisfactory conclusion on whether or not, bank and cash complies with my audit plan. Alrighty, thanks for the share, Taf. I'm going to take back. Actually, no, I'm not going to take back. Before I even touch on our next amazing working paper or our value added components, I'm going to explore the review section independently, right? But I'm going to call in another colleague of mine that has not yet had the opportunity to amaze our users with her tips and tricks. We often wonder if her internet speed is sponsored by Thor, as her responses are quick as lightning. Please welcome the ever bubbly Mariandre.
The first thing I want to talk about is actually just a tip, not really a trick in particular or something I want to show you. It's just something I want to mention. So when you perform an audit for an entity like a legal entity, you will have 2 audit files on your client list. So they will basically look like this. So for this Jackson Inc., I have 2 audit files. So one's for the entity audit. That's where I will be performing the audit on the operations of the entity. So you will see under working papers, I have selected RAC here, meaning RAC is based on the ISOs, and I'm covering the entity operation audit on the ISOs. Okay. The second file that I'm using is for my trust account. For this one, I'm using the working papers legal practitioner, or we also have an option for property practitioners. That will simply be to do the audit for the trust account. These methodologies are based on ISAE 3000. Okay, so that's just something to take note of, that you do need to have 2 different files for that. Then we're going to jump over to the next one. So when you go to lead schedules, I'm going to perform a review now. I want to go to my property plant and equipment lead, and I want to perform the review on this lead now. We actually have quite a cool function here where you can select your tick marks, and we have a list of the tick marks here at the bottom. The list of tick marks is also here on the side. So you can see we have a little shortcut for you with all of the tick marks here. In the column that says ticked, I can go on the drop down, just simply select the tick mark that is applicable that I want to use. Or I can simply go and use the menu on the side, double click, and it also applies the tick mark. Okay. But now on this list, there's nothing referring to fixed asset register, and I want to agree this to my fixed asset register. So what to do now? If you go to client setup, you can go to tick marks. And on here, you will see the exact same list that we just saw on the lead schedule. So here we can go and we actually can add a brand new tick mark. So in this orange bar at the top, I'm going to type in FAR as my tick mark. I'm going to move over and type in agreed to fixed asset register. And I'm going to press enter on my keyboard. The moment I press enter, it moves to the bottom and it's created. That's my one option. The other option is not to simply go and create a new one, but to actually edit one of the existing ones. So I'm going to use the very last one as an example. I don't want it to say FS only. I want it to say AFS and forward it to AFS. So I just click and edit, press enter, and it's updated. If I go back to my lead now, it's not on here as yet. So just close the lead, no need to panic. It still needs to refresh, and just go to the lead again. And there you can actually see that there's my added tick mark and the edited one as well. It's also quite cool because it's now added those changes to the sidebar. And even if I go on the drop down here, you will see that Draftworx automatically added it on this side as well. So now I can simply go use the drop down or use my sidebar and go and apply the tick box. Okay, pretty amazing. Don't need to do anything funny. You can easily add or edit your tick marks. Okay, then the next thing that we're going to go into is 12.10. This is also in the review methodology. So this is the understanding of the entity. So as Nicole mentioned earlier, this is not always the most fun working paper to complete because it's quite lengthy, but very important to do note everything on here. So while completing this, there's a section, for example, like related parties. So in my entity, I have 5 listed related parties because that's the space that I have available. But my entity actually has 8 and not 5. So I won't go and insert rows here. The reason for that is it will break working papers going forward. As everything is so integrated into one another and pulling from one to the other, we don't do that. So what we will be doing is we're going to clear the information that I've entered in these cells. So to do that, I'm just highlighting all of the information and using the delete button on my keyboard. That basically clears everything. Then I go and create an external document outside of Draftworx with all of the relevant information. So I have a PDF document added here. If I open it, you will see that it's got all 8 entities and related parties listed with the relevant information. So I'm not going to add this PDF document into my file, and I'm going to add a hyperlink here so that when you want to go and see what the related parties are, I'll simply use the hyperlink to access it. Okay, so before I run ahead of myself, let's do the process together. So I'm going to use the PDF, and I'm simply going to select it and drag it over and drop it on the working papers menu. That adds the file to my Draftworx. So if I go to working papers and I look on the menu, you will see my files added there. I will then go back to the cell where I wanted to refer to, go select hyperlinks, go to that section, and there's my PDF. So I simply double click on the PDF and it adds the hyperlink for me there. So the very cool thing about this is no person would have to go and search for external documents or go and find it somewhere. We can simply go and click on the hyperlink and it opens up that information and we have a whole list there. Okay, and that's simply how you will deal with any of the information on here that doesn't have sufficient rows available. So if there's more than 5 estimates, you will deal with it exactly the same. Okay, my very last tip is related to the engagement letter. So I'm going to go to 10.30. I'm going to show you 2 different engagement letters just to show you that they do look a bit different, and therefore it's important to use the engagement letters that's relevant to the specific engagement that you are having with the client. So on the first engagement letter, it's in the review methodology. We have these blue cells. So as we know with the normal financials, blue cells are usually entry cells, and in the engagement letter, it's exactly the same thing. So we will edit some of the information that's in the engagement letter with these blue cells. So say, for example, the attention must not be Sirs. I want it to be attention to Nicole. I'm going to go M-E Ainsman. Oh, sorry, Nicole.
That's all, Jill.
And then, okay, and then you will see it automatically updated here on the side as well. So that's just something cool. But now we get to a different thing. So in this paragraph, for example, if we read through it quickly, I'll point it out for you, but it refers to directors. So my client is a trust, for example, and I don't want it to refer to directors. I rather want it to refer to trustees. We don't have a blue block here on the side. So what to do? If you look at the bottom here, we have an additional sheet called settings. So if we go to settings, you will see there's a management description option where it says directors, and we're going to change it to trustees. If we now jump back to the letter on the side, you will see that the paragraph wording changed to trustees. The fantastic thing about that is that you don't then have to scroll through the letter and find all of the wordings and change it manually. You can simply go and change it on that setting screen and it will change it throughout the letter for you. That's the same thing that will happen with all of these options that's available here. Just one thing I also want to mention, if you saw that I selected it from a drop down, if you see that the option that you want to use is not on the drop down, these cells are blue. So you are able to actually overwrite it by simply typing in the wording that you need. Okay, so then I'm just going to jump to the last engagement letter I want to show you. This engagement letter is in the legal practitioner methodology. So in here, you will already see that it looks a bit different. We only have this one blue cell at the top. There's no blue cells on the side. But I also obviously would have some information in the engagement letter that I would like to update. If you go to the settings sheet once again, you will see that we have some options to change the information in here. But then something that I want to point out that's very important is this period options here. So it should update automatically, but sometimes there might be a reason that it's not the correct date. As it is blue cells, you are able to overwrite it. So sometimes it might have been overwritten and the dates are no longer correct. It's very important to set up the dates correctly in the engagement letter on the settings screen, especially in the legal practitioner and property practitioner working papers. The reason for that is these dates will be pulling through to the rest of the working papers that will follow, and I'm sure Nicole will touch on those. But it's very important that these dates are correct here, and then they will be correct in all of the other working papers. So should you ever experience date issues in your working papers, please come back to the engagement letter and update them here. Okay, Nicole, that's it from me. Back to you.
Thanks, Mariandre. I love those tips and tricks because I know they pop up a lot, and yeah, they kind of also flow in through the next couple of sections we're going to see. So yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. Let's hit into our next one, the independent review. Okay, so I'm going to just share my screen. You guys will hopefully see it. There we go. Alrighty, so I'm now in my independent review. Okay, now keeping in mind, our independent reviews are based on ISRE 2400, okay? Now, again, I'm only focusing on our key important documents here, right? We want to get you to a point to understand what kind of documents I need to at least consider before I can proceed with maybe populating or anything like that, but key consideration documents. So with regards to review, what you need to remember is, okay, I still need to consider my public interest score, okay? Now, again, I know I have mentioned it, but for public interest score, please join us on Thursday, the 30th of January for XBRL, where we're going to go into a bit more detail about public interest score. Because remember, your public interest score at the end of the day kind of also nudges you as to, am I doing the correct working paper? I mean, should this be an independent review? Should this be an audit? Okay, so very key considerations, and also really good to know when you're doing an XBRL submission. Okay, so join us for Thursday session. Right, back to our session today. Okay, my key consideration document always is, let's have a look at my working papers. Here are all my little sections. Again, finalization. There's my engagement and team setup. There's my planning. So you can see a little bit different, but some documents very similar to RAC, okay? So where the documents do kind of look similar, okay, it's because of ISQM and quality management, right? This will pop up at firm levels, i.e., are you independent? Okay, so it's always going to be a consideration, hence always, the working paper being available. Okay. There I've got my likely to be misstated. Okay, so remember we're looking at, is something likely misstated in an independent review? And then of course I should have my cycles. Okay, and of course mine's saying where are my review programs? Okay, so Now, how would I get to my review programs? So where do we begin? Well, we begin at the beginning, the engagement acceptance and continuance. So once again, I need to have a look and I consider. Okay, so I'm going to highlight a few things here. You'll see, is the engagement new, continuing? I need to choose my decision. Okay. When I do, certain things will either disappear or they'll make themselves not applicable. Okay. So again, we're kind of nudging you to not go and complete a working paper and just say, not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. Okay. Now, what you need to pay attention with in the difference between this engagement acceptance and say RAC's engagement acceptance and thing is the questions. So yeah, you'll see you're getting an ISQM question. You need to consider that. Am I satisfied with ISRE 2429AI? So I need to read through the questions, answer appropriately, yes, no, reference to my work. Mariandre did show us nicely how to hyperlink. This will also probably be shown again in RAC. So hyperlinking is awesome. Okay, can, instead of having to go try and track where your working papers are, can hyperlink to where the work is done. Another beautiful feature within Draftworx. Now, again, what did we say? Yellow kind of says to me, hey, you need to do some work. So there you'll see it's nudging me and it says, please complete 1002. So that's my firm independence. We've easily hyperlinked it to you. So when you're completing it, you just go in, do the working paper, consider all the questions, go mark yes or no. And of course, any reasons or deviations you would then document. So light blue cells indicate, I can go in, type, update my information. Okay, so run through all my questions, go through this quite extensively, check, have I considered the correct framework, for example? Is this a special purpose framework? So all these questions need to be considered and assessed with your professional skepticism and judgment. So lots and lots of questions here. And again, what's our key important one? Are we accepting? Are we like, do we want to do this audit? I mean, I know sometimes people don't really want to do an audit, but you have to, okay? We signed up for this. So we're going to say, okay, I'm willing to do this review and I am going to accept it. Okay. Obviously, at this point, if you decline, well, there you go. No further work required. Obviously, you need to explain why you're declining, but there we go. I'm accepting my engagement, considered all my engagement options. Now, another crucial one, again, and it's not really crucial in any sense, but it relates to certain other sections. So remember, I've said, throughout all our working papers, we have a flow. So as Mariandre explained, and we'll see it again later when I kind of go through them, if you fill in information in one area, it will populate somewhere else, like in the engagement letters, like maybe in your planning sections, it will pull through to other documents. So planning materiality in this sense, okay? You'll see I've pre-selected a 450. Also, very different to what RAC looks like. It's not as extensive, but I need to have a baseline, okay? Because when I'm identifying my review sections, am I going to now go review every single line item? Am I wanting to maybe review material items? You know, you've got to take all of that into consideration. So need a materiality figure. So there I've got my 450, okay? I go to my identification of review sections. Okay, now this is crucial. Why is this a crucial document? Well, you're identifying what you're going to do the review work on, okay? Or are you able to maybe address something analytically? Okay, now again, we're going to highlight something. So it's always investment income. So investment income, I can see is not quantitatively material, okay? So it's marked it for me as an additional review component, okay? Because I'm taking into consideration, is it a quantitatively material item or is it a qualitatively material item? So I need to do that assessment. But in this case, investment income is indicative as a no, right? Let's go change back our materiality, change it to a 1, the bare minimum, okay? Now you would see, okay, I've not identified it, or it's not going to my preliminary analytical review results because I'm saying this is going to be audited because it is material. Okay, end of story. I'm going to add it. But now, in hindsight, I actually need to go and consider what my materiality is. So I go plug in my materiality again. Okay, happy with it. Righty, now, when you've got investment income, okay, so let's look at revenue and investment income. Revenue was quantitatively material and hasn't been identified as an additional review component, but it is applicable to my review. Okay, so in other words, I'm going to perform procedures to satisfy that revenue is not likely to be misstated. Okay, investment income, however, okay, not quantitatively material, possibly qualitatively material. I need to use my assessment on that and make a decision. However, it's been identified as an additional review component. So it's being included in analytical and it's still applicable to my review. Okay. Now, when something is identified as an analytical review option, you'll see at the bottom here, I've got all the different tabs. I can see components, I can see analytical, and I can see cycles. So I'm going to hop to analytical, right? So there's my investment income. Okay, I have a question there. Was I able to conclude that this balance is not likely to be misstated? So I'm going to do two options here. We're going to say yes. Okay, I'm saying based on my reference of work done, I can happily state that investment income is not likely to be misstated. I give my reasoning. At this point, I no longer need to consider investment income. Okay, let's jump back to my components. And now you'll see it said, okay, investment income, we've satisfied ourselves in the analytical review results. We no longer need to test it. We're therefore not going to add it to the review program. Okay, so analytical, if I say yes, I've satisfied my results, I'm happy, there's no likeliness that it's been misstated, there we go. However, I'm not quite satisfied with what the client has given me and something's a bit fishy, so I'm going to say no, I wasn't happy to conclude, all right? So if I say no, I'm identifying an area that is now a likelihood to be misstated. So this would pull through to my 1505, okay? Right, so I can just go say hi. Okay. On my components now, what you'll notice is because I wasn't able to satisfy it, I still need to provide a little bit more work on it to, identify, was it really likely to be misstated or have we satisfied it in the auditing process? Okay, so as you can see, it's kind of crucial to decide what work am I actually going to continue with and do. Now you'll see cycles. So obviously, when you go through your whole one, you need to identify that everything applicable to the review has been allocated to the correct component. So fixed assets, I'm going to review PPE, depreciation, and fair value adjustments. Okay, that's where I want it. That's where I want to test it. That's where the cycle will populate. Okay, when I'm happy with these, I can then sign this off. So let me just quickly log in. Okay, sign it off. And now I just hop to another working paper screen and go to working papers, populate my working papers. And at the bottom of the screen here, you'll see I've got stuff populating. So this is how I would now have my additional cycles. So there I've got my revenue. I can now go and perform those procedures, satisfy whether or not, the financial statements are free from material misstatements. I know you've already thanked them, but Mariandra with her super quick lightning fingers, thank you for answering all those Q&As. Thank you, Clarissa, as well, as always. So without much ado, I've only got a few other sections to cover for you guys. What I am looking at now is my legal practitioner. Legal practitioner, we've based it in accordance with the guide of ISAE 3000. So again, focus here is key decision documentation. Right. Now, again, what's my key decision documentation? So we're just going to have a look at my working papers again. And I see I've got finalization, engagement and team setup, planning, and procedures. Okay. Now, ironically enough, with our legal, we have one audit program already populated, and that is the agreed upon procedures program. Okay. in order for me to get my other audit programs populated, I do need to do a little bit more work. And then these are why the key important documents are discussed. All right, so let's have a looky. So in section 10, obviously, engagement acceptance. Now, one needs to, i.e., address all my conditions. So again, is it a new, is it a continuing? I can say continuing. Is it based on a component or larger? Again, we also guide you to which reference in the guidelines we are referring to. Okay. Now, go through the whole document. Again, we have hyperlinks to applicable documents. And now I've got to make those key decisions. Are we going to say, based on the above, I'm willing to continue? Yes. Am I accepting it? Yes, I am. But before I move on from 10, you'll notice that unlike the other engagement acceptance, I have another little sheet over here. This one is kind of important in the sense of I've got to consider preconditions because now this is an assurance engagement. So now I need to go and read through all of these and evaluate my responses and my comments and then make sure, have all the preconditions been met? Okay, so again, crucial document in terms of 10, I've covered all of those. All right, now 10.10 materiality. Now this is a compliance audit. Okay, so here we do make reference to it. This is only applicable to the audit of a legal practitioner's trust account. Okay, so here I now need to just consider my materiality. So the qualitative materiality impacts. And then, of course, once I've considered it, what is the potential impact on that materiality? Okay, it's just a document for consideration that you would want to maybe look at. Again, look at the wording, check is it in accordance with what you are actually considering and the impact it would have on your specific client. Okay, highlighting this because it looks completely different to our normal materiality amount. You don't see any apt figures pulling through. Okay, so this is a consideration document and it speaks mostly on your qualitative materiality. Okay, now when it comes to your legal practitioner, the engagement letter is very important, as Marianne showed us so nicely. Okay, you want this done so initially all your setup is correct. The information that affects the naming of other groups throughout any of your other areas in the reports will update accordingly. Okay, so as you'll see, my report engagement letter, this is what I would submit to my director. I do have an annexure. So if I am required to do the agreed upon procedures, there we go. I've got my annexure with obviously all those general items. And then, of course, my settings. Okay, so here I can go and I can address, well, does this particular legal practitioner have one or do they have many bank accounts? I need to do these considerations here within 10.30 so that it sets up my workflow accordingly. Remember, workflow, you're going to hear it a lot because all our documents flow from one to the other. Okay, so she has highlighted our importance of the dates. So again, you know, just kind of review your settings, make sure that your engagement data is in accordance with whom it should be so that you're able to address all the relevant options. Okay, now we get to a new document and it is called applicability of the rules. So it's in your planning section. Okay, this is our key decision document here. Now this is going to say, okay, got my legal practitioner that I'm looking at. And what you'll see is we have the appendix to where we've referenced. So first one, and it's addressing which rule, which act, all right? Here's all the accounting requirements and everything that goes. So this is basically based on the guidelines from the standard, okay? Now we go and we put this there. Now I need to assess, is this applicable to my legal entity? Yes or no, all right? Why do I want to assess whether it's applicable? Well, I need to, in order to ensure I don't go and open unnecessary, not applicable working papers. You know, you want to kind of just at least populate what you want to do without adding too much information to it anywhere further. Okay, so I know what I was like when I was in auditing. I didn't like to have to go to a working paper and just go not applicable, not applicable, not applicable to each section. Okay, yes, we do have a button that says not applicable, which is great, but if I don't have to populate the working paper, let me prevent myself from doing that now. Okay, so I go and I have a look. Okay, accounting requirements general, yes, it's applicable. So you can see drop down menu, I can go and choose yeses and nos. So again, I'm not suggesting you do this in the real world. I'm just showing this to highlight it. I go and I say, what is applicable to my audit? Yes or no? So I'm just randomly selecting. Of course, you wouldn't want to do that. You would want to read this. Otherwise, you know, not really compliant with anything. I'm just gung-hoing it, and that's not what we want to do today. Okay, so I'd go and I'd read through all my rules, requirements, and see, am I addressing what is applicable to my legal entity? Okay, I'm not going to go through my whole one. I definitely love the motor vehicle section, so I'm going to go for a yes there. What you'll also notice, I've got applicable rules, but then I have risk procedures. Okay, so I'm going to highlight something on the risk procedures document over here. And what you will notice is, okay, again, we're making reference to the rules and acts, all right? We're identifying any assurance engagement risk, okay? And of course, I've got a level of risk 4, right? It's a significant thing. It's legal practitioner. It's very serious stuff. Okay. But what I'm looking at here is there's a response to an assessed assurance engagement risk, okay? And it says to be performed, yes or no. So what we've done is where this particular response is addressed elsewhere, in order for us, well, in order for you to not go and duplicate the work, we're saying to you, okay, you don't need to perform this work. You just need to say yes or no, okay? But we've said to you, hang 10, this is performed on 11, okay? So I go through my list again, I'm checking. So for example, discuss with management and inspect the accounting records. Do I want to perform it? Yes, I'm going to. Where is this going to populate? Section 20, okay? So all of this is kind of just letting me know where my responses to my assessed assurance engagement risks is being addressed. Great. All right, so I've gone, so very check. Remember, please actually read through these. Don't just do what I'm doing and scrolling down and hoping it all's going to work out. Okay, I want to make sure I'm actually doing the relevant sections because I don't want to unnecessarily audit. So again, get to the bottom. There we go. Everything is cleared out. Okay, now again, I get to working papers. Once I've assessed what applicable rules, what applicable risks I want to do, what am I going to do now? I'm going to populate some working programs. Okay. And I'm going to highlight something with the population over here. Righty. So let's make that bigger again. Okay. Now, if I go back to my working papers, see my procedures. So remember, when I first started, I had 25.20. Okay, so it was the only one that was populated, pre-populated. All of this is based on what I've identified in my applicable rules and what I've identified in the risk procedures. Okay, so of course, you want to go in, address all your procedures, address all your risks, and all of that. I want to highlight 25.20 as the guys went through some really lovely work on this one. And basically, what you're going to notice with 25.20 is these are the agreed upon procedures that you're performing, okay, right? So this is in respect of that refund of the bank charges and the audit fees, that lovely long form that we used to fill in and have to submit. So here we go. We've now got the working paper to assist you in that. So yellow, what's yellow telling me? Fill in some information, Nicole. So I can go and I can update information, as you can see. And now I'm going to basically go fill in all the relevant information. Why is that important? Well, if I fill in the information in 25.20 correctly and 25.20.02, ultimately what's going to happen is I'm going to go to working papers, going to go to finalization, and there is an important document, actually two. First one is 0501, okay? So this is my agreed upon procedures conclusion. And this will basically pull in my name. So you'll see there, Nicole, CA, woohoo, it's pulled that in automatically, okay? Now, of course, I go and I review all of this information. Clearly, I have not completed my work, okay? So not really wanting to conclude at this point, you would obviously want to make sure it does say it's been effectively executed with a yes. All right, so I haven't quite finished my work, so it is incomplete. But 0501 pulls in my information. From 0501, I'm then able to go to my final report, the one that I'm going to issue, my agreed upon procedures report, okay? Based on this, all my information from all of those 25.20s will pull through to this document. I would then be able to have my information and distribute that report. Okay, so that is our legal prac. All right, property prac, Krishna. Again, what are my important documents? So this one is a little bit different, okay? There's an important question you need to address when you're looking at accepting your engagement here. All right. So once again, working papers, you can see they're kind of set up in their folders. One thing to note, okay, property practitioner actually doesn't really have any population happen. So if I go and I show you my working papers, I don't have a populate. Okay, I can add an additional template like consideration of non-compliance, but I'm not populating any because these are pre-populated according to the relevant sections. Okay, now engagement acceptance. Again, remember, crucial document. Are we continuing this or are we, declining it? So again, you go, you select your responses. But now I see a particular question here, and this is quite an important question for property practitioner. Okay, please. Is the client a payment processing agent? All right. My conclusion here will effectively affect all these working papers. Why do I say that? So I'm going to say no to payment processing agent. Look what it's going to tell me. It's going to highlight that, okay, well, because you aren't that, you do not need to go and do all those working papers listed there. You would then go and mark them as not applicable, okay? All right. However, if I am a payment processing agent, I need to indicate yes, and then it's not me, but my client is a payment processing agent, indicate yes, follow through the document. You will see there's lots of questions where we reference to ISA 3000. You do need to read through each question to make sure that whatever I'm addressing in my engagement pulls through to my relevant working papers. Again, I need to conclude. So am I accepting? Yes. Am I not accepting? I take it. But I see other sheets here. So 10002, again, I need to consider preconditions for an assurance engagement. So again, once again, read through the questions, just make sure that the comments are applicable and I have met my preconditions for ISA 3000. Okay. Then on 10003, in this case, we need to consider, is an EQR required? So I need to go and address this. So I can either say, yes, it is, no, it's not, or no, one won't be performed, okay? Remember, when I do indicate that, it will pull through to my relevant documentation. So now I'm going to say, yes, I'm based on the above, I'm going to accept it, and there we go. I've now accepted my engagement. We're moving on to our next stage. Again, materiality, just want to highlight, not the same as it is in, RAC or review. Again, we're looking at the considerations for qualitative materiality. All right. So again, I need to evaluate it, consider it, what is my impact, and go on. Same as our legal property practitioner. 10.30 is kind of a very critical documentation. Again, why is this? Well, when I'm in 10.30, what I'm ultimately doing is setting up all the relevant information that will then go and be utilized throughout my engagement, i.e., I'm going to go and I'm going to say, I've got many trust bank accounts, or I've got one. Was it an independent review? Was it an audit? I need to indicate that so it pulls through to the relevant documents. Okay. And of course, put in an engagement letter date. The annexure, again, directly refers to our agreed upon procedures. So it's just kind of giving you an idea. Obtain the following, etc., etc. Now we focus on the important sections. So I'm just going to highlight 20.20. We do have all the other ones that you would consider, but I'm just going to go on 2020. It's the same theory is going to apply. So now when you hit 2020, you'll see I've got 2020, Part A, Part B, an extra A, an extra B, money laundering, and a sampling calc Part A. All right, so here it's telling me my overall risk level was addressed on working paper 11 and it was set as it's significant, okay? If you need to change this, please obviously go have a look at document 11 and update your level of risk, okay? Now, I'm just going to leave mine as is. And again, I've got a whole lot of questions, but they relate to certain sections of my trust accounts. Okay, so here you can see it's referencing to section 54.1 and 54.2 of the PPA, all right? So again, I need to go and identify, well, was the procedure executed? Yes. Were there any exceptions found? I can say no. Was maybe something found? And I can say finding of instances of non-compliance. I need to indicate that. Because at the end of the day, when you're going through all of 2020 and its sheets, you preferably do not want any yellow cells. Because if I have a yellow cell, it's not going to be addressed in my final report. Okay, so I need to go and select all of these. There we go. Instance, whatever I need to fill in. Part B, I can then go again and say, okay, well, in an instance, provided me this information, okay, and I go and I address whether yeses or no's, no exceptions were found, to say our findings was, I'm just going to go through a few of these. Okay, again, read through all the questions as they relate to the relevant sections in the PPA Act. Kind of go and have a look, scroll through. Yellow indicates a lot of information that needs filling in. Why do I want to fill that information in? Well, I'm busy doing my audit. It's going to come through to my audit program, well, finalization. There's also an extra for your total interest received. So we just add some figures in for fun, okay? Obviously, you would add figures in that are relative to your audit. I'm adding it in for fun, just for illustrative purposes. Righty, then of course I've got my extra B. So again, we're just gonna add some figures. Okay, probably every auditor is cringing right now because I'm not doing this accordingly, but there we go. I've got some figures. Now I've done my trust account audit program. Okay, I've addressed everything. I've had a look and considered money laundering. I can go and also indicate the number of separate trust accounts. So do not forget your sample calculator. I can go and I can obviously address, you know, how many instances I've tested. So let's just go and say they've got 5. I'm going to say 30, and it's going to give me a sample size of 10. Okay, based on my significant risk of 4, right? So we do kind of show that off. Now, go do your 2020, you filled in all your questions, go to working papers. Now, one document that should always be checked first before hitting, because of course, I've gone and done my trust account audit program. So I see trust account report, and I want that one. I need to open 05 before I open 08. Because 05 is my conclusion, which pulls through to my trust report, okay? So here you'll see I've got part A and part B. So again, some yellow questions that I need to go and address. I go and I fill in this as relevantly as I want to. There we can see, hey, my name has pulled in. No instances of anything was found. Great stuff. The following exceptions were noted. I just didn't note what they were. But again, it's pulling through. So once I've opened 0501, I'm able to go to my trust account audit report. And when I do, my information is available to go and distribute to obviously your clients. Okay, so again, part A will always reference to part A, part B will reference to part B. There's my lovely little figures coming in, which came out of the air. And of course, here's my report pulling in any information. I do have settings. I didn't put in an engagement letter date, hence why you see a hashtag value. If you have got any hashtag values or if your dates are not pulling through correctly, by all means, hop onto our amazing support team and they will assist you with that. But this is basically just the generalness of your property and your legal practitioners. Now we're going to get into our last two. So we've just got two more to go, guys. Okay. Agreed upon procedures. So what is an agreed upon procedure? Well, I have this client and they're really concerned that maybe, their cash is not being completely accounted for. Okay. So they say to me, Nicole, I need you to do a specific thing for me. I'm not interested in anything else. I'm literally just interested in you giving me assurance on X, Y, and Z. Okay. So I'm like, alrighty. Again, we have a look. So here we go. We check it out. There's our working papers. Very similar. I've still got my finalizations, engagement planning, procedures. Okay, cool. So what do we always start with? Well, are we going to accept this engagement? Okay. Now keep in mind, agreed upon procedures, we focus on ISRS 4400. Okay. So I go and I have a look. Which ethical code is to be applied? Okay. Now I need to go and say, well, I'm going to use my psycho code, right? Do you have any reasons to, so again, you read the question, select the drop down. If you choose not applicable in any one of these working papers, remember that's a very much valid answer, okay? As long as you've used your professional judgment and it is not applicable. I mean, you can then at least satisfied with it's not applicable. All right, so again, kind of read through all the questions. This one is quite long, so I just go through, check what I need to do. Yes, so what do I have? Partner conclusion. Am I going to do this? Yes. I want to check if these guys, are being robbed. Awesome. Let's have a look. I like to do some little investigative auditing here and there. So let me check it out. Let's go and see this agreed upon procedures. Right. So again, engagement acceptance, sign off, and now I can have a look at our important document. So once again, I don't actually populate any working papers. Yes, I have additional ones that I could add, like verifying an opening balance maybe, or no CLAR considerations, but I'm not going to populate any working papers, okay? This isn't a full-on audit, it's just agreed upon procedures. So 10.20 is critical in this sense, right? So in most of our others, what have we had? We've identified sections based on the financial statement information, okay? So we'd be like, okay, yes, trade receivables, are we going to test it? Yeah, we are. But now this is completely different. So now I need to go and consider things in order for me to actually address it and perform the procedure. So I have a look and I see, okay, so what's my management's objective requirement? Check that Nicole is not stealing. Okay, right. And what procedure am I going to perform? Well, I can go and say, re-perform all cash counts, maybe. I don't know. Okay, it's been a while since I've had to create my own procedures. Okay. Also, let's just make sure that Nicole is preparing lead schedules. Really pulling this out of the bag here. And then again, go and check leads. Okay. These are very vague. Obviously, you will use your professional skepticism. Please don't use these, okay? Just trying to get the point across for illustrative purposes. So I need to identify my objective or my requirement from management. I need to perform or at least identify a procedure that's going to let me satisfy that Nicole is not stealing. Okay, right. Who's my engaging party? We'll go for Bob. Who's the intended users? Let me just go and say yes. Sorry, is the engaging party an intended addressee? So yes, we'll address everything to Bob. Who's the intended users? Bob's shareholders. Okay, and who's the responsible party? We'll go for Bobby. Okay. Now I can go and I can describe the primary objective of the engagement. We want to ensure no theft. Okay. And again, what's the primary purpose of this? Ensuring inputs. Okay, so again, I need to just go and add like evaluating all cash counts. Would help if I could spell today. Really hope I could spell today. Cash is definitely not stash. Okay. Now again, you'll see a description of the applicable code. So there, my Psycho code is pulled through. Okay. Are there any independence requirements? Yes or no? And then, of course, I need to describe the primary purpose of the engagement. Right. Once I have successfully filled this in, okay, I'm going to hop across to 20.20. Now, 20.20, when I open it, will now show me, okay, procedure 1 was reperform all the cash counts. So you can see how filling in 10.20 has saved me having to add my information here. Reference to the work, sign off, was it achieved? Yes, no, great stuff. And then, of course, this would help you come to a conclusion of whether or not Nicole was in fact stealing. It was found out that she was not. Okay, well done, Nicole. Great stuff. Okay, so that's your agreed upon procedures. And those are your key consideration documents. And then finally, and not least, you do have accounting officer, right? So our accounting officer working papers, okay, right? Where am I going to go with this one? And again, broken record, you guys should know this by now. Where are we going to start? We're going to start at 10. Okay, why? Because we are wanting to set up our engagement. We want to accept it. We want to make sure it's great. So this one is a little bit different. Okay, you'll see how I have a tab called setup. And then I've got 10.01 and 10.002. Okay, so setup. Is this the first year that we are performing this engagement? Yes, no. I'm going to say yes. Is it the first year of operations? No, they've been in for a while. Do we maintain the corporation's accounting records? No, they do. Are we required to prepare the tax return? We'll say yes for this one. Date of their most recent engagement letter. Well, let's just go with today's date. Okay. And which financial reporting requirement? IFRS SME. Okay. So you can see I can select basis, IFRS SME, or full IFRS. The options are available in the drop-down. I can reference to supporting documents if I need to. Then, of course, I'm now going to go to 10.001, and I'm going to say, okay, accepting this engagement, is it going to cause any conflict of interest? So, of course, I can say yes or can say no. I need to go and consider, evaluate all of these options. So, again, I need to address it, and it's asking me, what is the PI score? Okay, so again, PI score is very crucial in considering, am I actually doing the correct engagement? Right. So, I mean, I could be winging it and thinking, I'm doing an independent review, but you go and you do your PI score and you realize it should have been an audit. Eek moment. So PI score, really good document to consider, right? So, of course, I've got to go to 10.002. Now I need to address, yes, okay, what was my entity? Go, let's just quickly fill in some information. And again, I'm going to go and create a little bit of a PI score. Again, this is covered in XBRL, so bear with. And I just need to kind of go and say, let's just say no here. I'm just going to kind of go no. I want to say yes over here. So again, I'm just randomly selecting some options. Okay. Yes, they are volunteered that they wanted an accounting officer report. Okay, we just say no, and we just say, just want to get it populated quickly so that you can see. And this kind of theory here goes through all our working papers. When I do complete something and it belongs in another field, okay, yes, neither an audit or an independent review is required. I can happily satisfy myself that my accounting officer will be appropriate to continue with. So if I go look at 10.001, all those lovely little questions I answered have pulled through, and this happens in quite a lot of our working paper processes. Okay, and then I now need to just go and accept again. So yes, I'm willing to accept it. Yes, I'm going to accept it. Great stuff. And in most working papers, there is guidance sheets available as well. But if you do get stuck, again, highlighting our really awesome support team, they're more than happy to point you in the right direction. Okay, so what's my next very important document when it comes to an accounting officer? Well, we've got 10.20 to consider. So why is 10.20 an important document? Well, now I need to figure out what am I actually going to focus my, accounting officer sections on. So I can go and I can say, well, property, plant and equipment. Yes, we're going to do that. Depreciation, well, it goes hand in hand together. So yes. So I can go and I can select yeses and nos. So you'll see it basically pulls and everything. So very much similar to identifying the sections for the review, or in RAC, identifying your audit components. Here, I'm just basically identifying what I want to include in my engagement so that when I populate working papers, I will have that cycle available. So once I go through all of that, there's my working papers. I would then go populate them, and they would then add to my sections. Okay, I obviously haven't signed off everything yet, so I need to sign off those relevant documents. Okay, but you need to complete this in order for you to, I think I actually need to save 1020, apologies, and then I can populate. Okay, there we go. I think they're populating now. No, still not. I don't think I selected the correct things. So there we go. Fixed assets. I only selected fixed assets. My apologies. Been a long day. So there we go. I've got my setup. I've got my procedures. And now I can go and say, yes, no, it's reference to the work. Very much similar. Blue cells, you can go and comment in it. And there we go. So that brings us to the end of our various value-added components. So jump back to our slide. So remember, these are your key decision documents. These you want to at least be able to fill in order to get the correct direction of the flow of your work that you're going to go through. So I have indicated all of those here. Okay. Populating your working programs, you'll see we were able to do it in RAC, we were able to do it in review, legal practitioner, accounting officer, and also just to note in RAC, you are able to populate estimates. Again, this will be covered on Tuesday, the 4th of Feb. So just as a note, when you're populating, remember, go to the Working Papers tab. There you'll see populate working paper programs, or add your additional templates if you so wish. Okay. And then in general, sequence. Sequence is very important. Okay. Sequence is always important to follow, especially with RAC, as everything that you do in one flows from one document to another. And if you tend to run a little bit too forward, you run the possible risk of either over-auditing or missing something that you should have audited and identified. Okay, so remember, sequence is key, right? When it comes to RAC template documents, you do not need to roll them forward, okay? Where we have those dark blue cells and you went and you filled in all that information for understanding the nature of the entity or anything along those lines, we do roll that forward for you. But we want you to make sure that your audit programs are always up to date and compliant with the latest ISOs. So we always keep that up forward. Working papers are just generally a guideline. You need to use your professional judgment in deciding what to complete, what level of assurance and detail do you want, and what you want to actually ultimately get as a result from it. Okay, again, not applicable, a very valid answer when based on your professional judgment. Firm quality control manuals. This is an often question we sometimes get. We have partnered with Probita, so if you would like any assistance with that, you can contact us at sales@draftworx.com and we will happily address that. And then one thing that has been asked quite frequently, I'm not sure if in today's session, but it is quite a concern because of less complex entities. So at the moment, ERB has taken that decision not to implement the LCE standard in South Africa, okay, which would make development of the working paper, or previously known as methodology, quite difficult for us, as we will not have a local resource to draw on to get that input on the required changes in testing. We are going to gauge its implementation in the market, and then we will make a decision on development from there. Okay. And with that note, thank you all for participating today. Please be sure not to miss out on our RAC webinar on the 4th of February, where most of those RAC questions, hopefully if you have asked any, will be addressed in detail. The work is covered in detail. It's going to be an absolutely riveting session. I can't wait for it myself. And for all of those that are still within the sessions, remember XBRL, the beautiful XBRL, is due on Thursday afternoon. So please, please, please join us for that session. And that's me for today.
If you want to make a quick note, guys, of those numbers, please jot them down Maybe take a photo with your cell phone if you wish. So thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Shane.
yeah,
Our thorn amongst the roses.
oh, it's always a pleasure. Thank you to you. Thank you, Mariandre and to Fadzwa for your presentations. And then also thank you to Clarissa and Mariandre for handling the Q&A. Anything else?
No, just a big thank you to everyone for joining. It's been great with all of you. We absolutely adore all our users and our potential users. So thanks, everybody. And also, please do not miss the next 2 webinars. They're going to blow you away.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to the team. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you. For those of you who are going to be coming back again on Thursday, same time, same place. Lots of hearts coming through. Ah, that's just wonderful. We love that. Lots of clapping hands and thumbs ups and hearts. That's great. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. Take care.